Welcome to the Rascal Apiary kitchen. Today we're making beeswax wraps. For today's project, you're going to need a few things. I use a melting pot with a pot of water as a double boiling method. I'm going to use a sheet pan. You could also use parchment paper. I have this one specifically for wax products and other things from the hive, like when we cut comb. You'll need some jojoba oil, 1 ounce of jojoba oil, 1 ounce of pine resin, and 2.5 ounces of beeswax, and I'm using our fresh beeswax from the hive. You'll also need 100% cotton fabric, and I've cut most of my sheets into 11 by 11 inch squares, and you'll see why at the end.
You'll need to cut your fabric to the sizes and shapes desired. They don't all have to be the same size, but you may notice that most of mine are. I cut them to about 12 inches square, and you'll see why at the end of the video. I actually lost the lid for this bowl, so I'm going to cut my fabric specifically for this bowl. All you need to do is place the bowl right on top of the fabric, cut about 1 inch to 2 inches just around the outside edge. Here we have our 1 ounce jojoba oil, 1 ounce pine resin, and 2.5 ounces of beeswax, along with our fabric and baking sheet. Make sure you add about 1 inch or 2 of water in your pot below. Now we're going to add our beeswax into our top vessel, 2.5 ounces again. Next is our pine resin. And finally, we're going to add our 1 ounce of jojoba oil. And we're going to turn that heat on to a medium-low and wait for it to melt. Okay, here you see a pretty good sized chunk of pine resin and beeswax still. That's not a big deal. Just keep it on a low simmer, no boiling water. Low simmer and it'll keep melting. While we wait for our ingredients to melt, I'd like to show you my silicone mold. I got this from the dollar store, and it is perfect for measuring our beeswax and keeping it in nice manageable pieces. It's really easy to get the beeswax out of the molds. You just pop it right out, comes out nice and clean. And I know that they're all 2.5 ounces, as long as you fill the wax to the rim here. And I let several of them cool, and then I measured each one of them just to ensure that they're all the same size, and they were. So now I know each one of these shamrocks is exactly 2.5 ounces, so I can use them for projects like this, or making just a couple of candles at a time, or any other project where you only need a few ounces. The wax has melted! All of our oil, beeswax, and resin have all melted together nicely. Now on to the next step. You'll notice I have a baking sheet under my fabric. This is used only for wax products like this. I would recommend buying a very cheap sheet pan if you plan on making these regularly. If you want to make them maybe only once or twice, I'd suggest buying a disposable foil pan. Another option could be to cover your current pan with parchment paper. I've heard this works well, but I haven't tried it personally, so use at your own risk. Once your fabric's on your sheet pan, just pour the wax on and spread it around. You don't have to use a paintbrush here like I did, but I found it easier to move all of the product around to make sure everything is covered nicely. Now that all of my product has been spread out fairly evenly, I'll add the other pieces of fabric right on top. Once you have all your fabric laid down, pop your sheet pan into the oven. No need to preheat. Just go ahead and put it in and turn the oven to 300 degrees. You'll only leave it in for a few minutes. We just want all of the product to melt down again and saturate all of those layers. It's been a few minutes, so we're going to pull it out of the oven now. You can see the steam coming off the pan, so be very careful taking this out. Wax burns are not fun. I used my brush to press down the fabric that had puffed up a bit, since you want to make sure all of the fabric has been covered. Work quickly though, as the mixture cools very fast. I used a chopstick to lift the edge of the fabric so I didn't burn myself on the pan. But once you have the fabric lifted, go ahead and grab it with your fingers and just give it a little wave around. This will help cool the wax mixture a little faster and ensure a nice even coat. And you'll just continue doing this for the rest of your pieces of fabric. Pick them up, wave them around, and set them over to the side once they've cooled down enough. I'd suggest having a piece of parchment paper or even just a dish towel on your countertops, as the fabric is rather tacky. You don't have to wave the pieces of fabric around for very long. They do dry really fast. And you want to work as fast as you can to get through all of the pieces of fabric so they don't dry on your sheet pan. So just pick them up, wave them around for a couple of seconds, and then set them to the side and keep moving. You may have noticed a couple of my pieces of fabric were actually larger than the sheet pan. I just folded those over. It's not a problem. The wax product goes through all of the layers of fabric with no issues. You'll notice here that I have quite a bit of the wax product still on the sheet pan. That's not a big deal. If you have some other fabric cut already, you can go ahead and put that down, pop the pan right back into the oven for another minute or two, and it will melt right into the fabric, and you'll have a couple more sheets. If you don't want to make any more beeswax wraps at the moment, but you might want to make them in the future, if you save the pan, this mixture will just solidify on top of the pan and it'll melt right back down again. You can just put it away for later and cut your fabric at that point in time, put it on the pan, right back into the oven. You're good to go. And we're all done. I think I did about 7 wraps. Here's one of the smaller ones that I did, and let me show you how it works real quick. You can use either side. I like to use the pretty side out just because I think it looks nicer. I've got a little piece of cheese here. I'll just stick that right in the middle of the sheet. I'll fold it up and around, loop it over, just wrap it as you would with saran wrap. Squeeze it together, and the heat from your hands will melt the pine resin, beeswax, jojoba oil mixture just a little bit. It won't mess up your food or anything, but it'll just keep it sealed nice and safe. You can stick it in your fridge, toss in your lunchbox, and you're all set. Once you get back home, you'll want to clean your wax wraps in cool water with a little bit of soap. You just don't want to use hot water. You don't want to melt any of that wax mixture again. If you'd stayed tuned to the end, I'm going to show you how I make my roughly 12 by 12 inch squares into an easy sandwich wrap carrier. I use these instead of Ziploc bags. When I make my sandwich for work, throw it in here, wrap it up, toss it in my bag. Super easy, and I love it. And then once I get to work, I unfold it and I already have a plate. The easiest way to do this is to fold your square into diagonal. So you have that nice line right there. And then I'm going to fold the corner over just a little bit, line it up with that crease that you've already made. And now I'm going to sew on a button. Very simple. So I'm going to get my needle and thread. Here I'm going to use some embroidery thread. You can use something else. I like the embroidery thread because it's a little bit thicker. And then you just sew on a button. You'll need a button with needle and thread if you'd like to follow along with me here. I am using embroidery thread. I find it just a little bit sturdier. You'll need about a foot long piece. And once you have your needle threaded, go ahead and start your needle in the fabric from the underside where we have the corner folded over here. Then place your button on the needle and just finish sewing it on, making sure it stays centered to the corner here of the fabric. I'm leaving about a half an inch from the edge of the fabric, and you can still see about a half an inch in between the button and the corner. If you hold it up to the light, you can see the corner of the fabric from underside. I'm just going to use a crisscrossing method to sew this button on, and I'll do that twice just to make sure that it's nice and sturdy. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon because I do plan on using these for quite a while. Here you'll see I messed up, a couple of strands came loose from the embroidery thread, so it's nice to have self-threading needles. I'll just put that back on and finish threading it through. Now I'll just tie it off on the underside and cut off the loose end. Make sure you leave just a little bit, maybe a quarter of an inch to a half an inch, so nothing's going to come out. And make sure you're cutting the right side. You don't want to cut your long side. You'll need that to wrap around your button. I'll quickly show you how to fold using my recorder like you would a sandwich. Using this beeswax wrap, you're going to fold up from the bottom, fold in from the sides, and over from the top where the button is. Then you will take your string, wrap it around the bottom, around, and you can do this a couple of times if you want. It's not really necessary. And then just wrap it a couple times around the button. Nice and secure, nice little pouch, keeps your sandwich nicely wrapped, and unfolds to a nice plate so you can eat off of it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and let me know what you think of the video in the comments below. I'll see you next time.